Okay, so let's see. The first thing we're gonna do, we've got like a page, just a little over a page of scripted opening. You ready for scripted opening?
I assume I just respond to your inane bullshit as always.
Yes, that is correct.
Let's go.
All right. John! John! I am verklempt. I'm just absolutely overcome. You do realize that we are recording our season finale?
I know. 2 seasons. Two more than anyone expected.
I certainly did not expect 2 seasons. I did not expect to get beyond episode maybe 2? I thought you would be done with my bullshit at that point.
You know, I am a patient person.
Lazy, maybe?
How? Wait. Eric, I put a lot of work into these episodes. I listened to at least 4 pieces of music for every one of these, okay?
I'm going to defend you. Are you ready for this? I'm going to defend you. You listened to 2 albums for this episode.
Full albums.
I'm surprised you not have like a little bit of blood trickling out of your ears at this point.
Well, today I got to listen to good music.
Yeah, I know, and you enjoyed it. You enjoyed it. I'm not wholly surprised. I mean, it is good music. Like Metallica, all the shit that I may occasionally talk, Metallica's first 2 albums are fucking great. They're great albums. So I'm glad. I'm really glad. I'm not glad about the fact that this is the last recording we're doing for the entire second season. Sunrise, sunset.
We don't have the rights for that.
Oh.
You better stop now.
You think
you go any further, we're going to be sued.
You think so?
Yes.
Damn it. Well, we'll keep it to that really short clip. Anyhow, despite the obvious midlife crisis implications of having reached yet another podcasting milestone, I also have the good fortune of being the bearer of some amount of good news. You want to hear it?
I love good news.
I thought you would. Now, obviously, after all of your chiding, this entire final episode of season 2, it's about Metallica.
Let's go.
You did it. You broke through. You broke me, basically, is what happened. And so here we are on the brink of discussing 2 of Metallica's finest albums. So that's going to be very, very exciting. Now, there is actually a second bit of good news. Did you know that we have a guest today?
I did know that, and I'm so excited that I get to actually talk yet again to an informed and intelligent expert on a topic.
I knew that you would enjoy that. We get to have this discussion with the extraordinary Ben Apatoff. He wrote the book on Metallica.
He did.
I mean, he wrote a book on Metallica, but it's a really good book on Metallica. Metallica, the $24.95 book written by Ben Apatoff. He graciously agreed to come on here, and he is going to discuss with us the early history of Metallica from their formation through Ride the Lightning. So that is really fucking cool. You don't have to listen to just me make bullshit up off the top of my head. So why doesn't everyone out there in podcast land just sit back and enjoy John and my discussion about the early history of Metallica with the illustrious Mr. Ben Apatoff. John and I will see you on the other side for a few parting words of heartfelt wisdom with which we shall conclude this second season of Heavy Metal 101. For now, gonna kick some ass tonight. We got the metal madness. Hit the lights, and let's do this fucking thing! Meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the wonderful Ben Apatoff to Heavy Metal 101.
Thank you. My pleasure. Great to be here.
Oh, we are absolutely thrilled to have you. My beloved co-host, John, is also in the house. John, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited to talk to an actual expert again.
It's like a whole big paradigm shift for you, right? You get to actually respect people with whom you're engaging in conversation.
It's great.
All right. Well, for those of you who may not be aware, Ben Apatoff is an author who wrote the absolutely magnificent Metallica, the $24.95 book. A book which, quote, looks at Metallica's cultural significance with chapters devoted to each member, each album, touring, fashion, books, film, influences, fandom, history, and more. And, if I may say so, the book does all of that incredibly well. Ben, I totally loved this book.
Thank you so much. Great to hear. Thanks.
Ben is here today to chit-chat with us about the early history of Metallica. John, we're talking about Metallica at last.
It feels like it's finally time.
It's like a homecoming of sorts, isn't it?
Well, look, I know nothing about Metallica or metal in general, but when you ask me to name a band when you say heavy metal, Metallica is the only one my idiot pea brain can think of. So it's nice that here at the end of our second season, we're finally talking about real metal.
I've taken a lot of shit from you and also from my friend Uzman that we haven't done anything of meaning on Metallica nearly 2 entire seasons into a heavy metal podcast. So I'm hoping you guys will leave me alone and stop annoying me after this.
That definitely won't happen, but this is a good thing nevertheless.
All right, good. Well, so the goal today specifically is for us to just cover the formation of Metallica, sort of the earliest days through the release of the great, the mighty Ride the Lightning. So enter Metallica at long last. Just to be clear, Ben, you should probably know this. Though John is aware of the existence of Metallica, John, you literally listened to Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All for the first time, like this week, right?
I listened to Ride the Lightning for the first time today, like an hour
Wow.
ago, and I listened to Kill 'Em All yesterday for the first time.
Ben, did you think you'd have the chance to talk to somebody with a completely fresh perspective on Metallica?
I did not, but that's great because I feel like there's so much to look forward to because I remember like that huge rush of hearing those records for the first time, but they get so much better with every listen that you've got so much to look forward to with Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, I should say just out of the gate, I did very much enjoy these records, which is unusual for me on this podcast. So I'm happy to be talking about this.
For anyone with a familiarity with our back catalog, you will know that John has terrible taste in music. Just absolutely terrible.
I don't
and
believe
usually doesn't like the material. Now, there are exceptions. Judas Priest famously is an exception. But yeah, John is not the proverbial metalhead. But I'm honestly, I'm not surprised. I kind of thought that you would at very least enjoy Metallica for their just general quality and effectiveness at doing what they do. Okay, now before we actually get to our through-line talk about Metallica, Ben, I understand that you are currently at work on a book about one of my very favorite bands, an entirely different band. Could you tell us about this new and exciting project you're currently working on?
Yeah, I'm writing the first ever book about body count. They're one of my favorites. It's for the 33 and a third series, which writes about great albums. I've dreamt of writing for them for more than half my life, so it's a huge honor. I got to interview the body count guys and a lot of other great musicians like Henry Rollins and Jello Biafra and the Living Color guys, Chuck D. Duff from Guns N' Roses. It's been really just a dream come true.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. And I will say, I love the 33 and a third books. I have a bunch of them. My room is a big pile of rock and metal books, and
Awesome.
A number of those are 33 and a third. I actually have a body count anecdote. I attended the Metallica Guns N' Roses tour at Oakland Stadium, the Day on the Green tour that Body Count opened for. And it was awesome. It was an incredible show. But the specific anecdote that I have is that after Body Count's set, while Metallica were playing, Ice-T, for whatever reason, was just kind of sitting at the front of this gigantic stage, and I was at the very front of the stadium, and I actually walked up to Ice-T while Metallica were playing and shook his hand and said, "That was amazing."
That's so cool. Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
He looked at me like I was a little 14-year-old asshole, but he did shake my hand. He totally shook my hand, so I have that to take away from it.
That's awesome. That's that tour just sounds like such a dream to me too. I love GNR and Metallica and Body Count, obviously. So yeah, I've always dreamt of like what that show would have been like because that's amazing.
That was a really good one. That was an awesome tour. John, you're a Body Count fan, right?
I have never heard of this band, but in quickly Googling it while you were just talking about it, it looks like something that I might actually be interested in.
I have this thing I might call the Metallica rule, which is the basic idea that no matter how good a band is, they generally tend to get, especially well into their career, worse. There's very few exceptions in popular music. There are some, but generally bands get worse. Body Count get better. I swear to God. I would say that the albums of the past few years are probably my favorite stuff that they've done. Bloodlust.
I love Bloodlust. Yeah. Oh wow, what a great record. Yeah, and that's something that comes up a lot in the story. Like I talked to Max Cavalera and Doc Coyle and Will Putney and the people on the new records. And like, how did that happen? They just kind of rebooted and just updated their sound and got even better. That's an incredible story.
It's awesome. It's so cool. With that, Metallica would do the same thing.
Yeah, still holding out hope, but yeah.
Meanwhile, Before we get deep into the formative history of Metallica, we've got us a brief opening salvo of questions so that us and our lovely audience can get to know you, Ben, just a teeny bit better. So, the first question, what's your heavy metal origin story? Like, how did you get into all this?
Well, I grew up in the 90s and raised on the rock radio then, so like Pearl Jam and Green Day and things like that. And I remember another kid bringing in Vulgar Display of Power to school and me being like, wow, like this was just like, who are these people? It's like unlike anything I heard. And it wasn't my first metal CD, but I tend to think my metal kind of like breakthrough as a No More Tears by Ozzy, which I was just like, I remember I could just like listen to that again and again and again. And it was really heavy, but also like accessible, like the 90s stuff. And, and I got really heavily into GNR and Metallica. And then I got into the bands that toured with them, and I got into like the Suicidals and Living Color. And so then I've just branched out from stuff like that.
That's awesome. All right, John, what do you got?
The decision to write a book is a massive undertaking. What made you want to write about Metallica specifically?
It's a total cliche, but the truth is that I did not have the Metallica book that I wanted to read. There are like some things that kind of touched on it, but I want a book about why they mattered and what their songs mean and their influence. And one that wasn't just like a fact book where you can look it up on the internet. I think what really pushed me into writing the Metallica book was I read something that Rob Sheffield wrote about the Beatles, where I'm going to paraphrase, but he said that for years, bands have sort of stylized themselves as the sort of like the badass alternative to the Beatles, like the Stones, Led Zeppelin, the Sex Pistols, like we're tougher, we're meaner, we're cooler than the Beatles, but nobody offends people as much as the Beatles. And to me, I was like, someone needs to say that about Metallica, because for years, like, we're Megadeth, we're Pantera, we're Slayer, we're black metal, we're death metal, we're heavier, we're meaner, we're cooler than Metallica. None of those bands offend people as much or touch people as much. Like, they're still causing this huge debate and, arguments. And I wanted to like show that, the older they get, the more they seem to offend people. And I just, I'm so fascinated by that, how they're still contentious and give us so much to argue about and think about and write about all these years. So I wanted to write that down.
I genuinely love that as a motivation. that speaks to me deeply.
I could definitely see that. Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing phenomenon. And I dare someone to post, particularly a 21st century Metallica song on like any heavy metal group.
Oh,
you are going to get just absolutely flamed by so many people.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Everything. Yeah. Posers, sellouts. No, it's the best one yet. I mean, yes, every opinion, right?
All right, John, you got the pointed final question. I'm very, very curious to see the response to this.
All right, for the record, this feels like a rude question to ask someone like you, but it says...
It's not rude. You're rude.
It feels a little rude. If you're able to choose... What would you say is your favorite Metallica album and why?
Boy, a lot of people be furious about me for saying this. I'm going to say because it started the class I taught and the thing that launched me the book deal, but the Black Album. It's just so much room for argument and discussion, and it's so heavy and so accessible. As a kid listening to those singles, that was my sort of gateway to them. Some days it's Justice, some days it's Kill 'Em All, sometimes I go back and forth between the first five, I'd say. But today I'll say the Black Album.
So then on the flip side, if you had to pick a least favorite album.
It's a cliche to say Saint Anger.
But it'd be right.
It would be right, that's true. I'm going to cheat a little bit. There are some, from the Saint Anger sessions, they record a bunch of Ramones covers that are so stale. And, the Ramones have so much life to them. And you kind of hear like the magic of the Ramones because like their songs are so simple, but like they have a chemistry that makes them work. And Metallica in their Saint Anger era, covering these sort of like Ramones single B-sides for a tribute album, and they just like devoid of magic in a way that like a great band covering a great band should not be. So yeah, I'd say Saint Anger, and also in particular those Ramones covers are just bad. Yeah.
So basically everything within 100 yards of Saint Anger was pretty
Everything
crappy.
within 100 yards of Saint Anger, which as I found out when I wrote the book, has a real following, which surprised me because I figured no one wanted to defend it, but like younger fans are like, no, you don't understand. Like The Unknown Feeling is my jam. Like it's been interesting to hear like some people who just found it at the right time and love Saint Anger.
That's fascinating. I'm taking an aesthetics class right now. I'm getting my PhD. The class is called Bad Music, and so it's kind of a focus on this idea. And I think the simple truth of the matter is if there is objectively no bad music, then there are going to be people who love Saint Anger. I mean, it's
totally, yeah.
It's bound to happen. They're wrong.
True, yeah. Yeah, I'm not a fan, yeah. Yeah, actually, last time I saw Metallica, James introduced stuff like, does anyone like Saint Anger? And like, the audience reaction was like palpable. Someone was like, someone even shouted like, "No, but I still love you!" And like, it was
it was a tough time for the band. They were very troubled.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right, cool beans. So the time is here at last. After basically 2 complete seasons of constant nagging from John and also our mutual pal Uzman, it is time for us to talk Metallica on Heavy Metal 101. We're going to do this thing chronologically. We're going to start at the very foundational moments of Metallica. So, Ben, what can you tell us about the earliest origins of Metallica? However did these psychologically damaged weirdos first come together to form arguably the most important heavy metal band of all time?
Well, it's fascinating. They're all such different people at the start. And, James was in a few different bands and he had these songs with names like Handsome Ransom and Hades Ladies that are lost to time. And he was like, I'm so embarrassed, but like I needed to write my songs. Like I couldn't play in the cover band because I wanted to write my own thing. And he meets Lars, who can barely drum, who's putting out ads in The Recycler, which is the newspaper that introduced Guns N' Roses to each other and Hole to each other. And James came over with, I believe, Ron McGovney, and they were like, is this a joke? Like, he can barely play the drums. But Lars, kind of showing the skills they had later on, sort of hustled them into it. And he was talking with Brian Slagle at Metal Blade, who was putting out the first Metal Massacre record. And he said, I have a band, save me a spot on it. And called back James and said, hey, if you want to be in a band with me, I can get you the spot on this record, and got him back. And yeah, they had a sort of chemistry together and they hit the lights on that, and the rest, as they say, is history.
The thing that amazes me about that is the fact that, for whatever reason, even the Metal Massacre, the first pressing of Hit the Lights, it's fully formed. It's obviously recorded poorly, it's sloppier, but it's the song, and it's the same song that opens up the first album.
Oh, yeah. And I just, imagine, listening to those first 9 songs, okay, some good, some bad, some... And then, the fade-in starts, and the very last song is Hit the Lights, and you're like, it's just a whole new thing is coming. It's just incredible to hear. But, yeah, they barely had a band. They got, Lloyd Grant to record a solo, and they didn't have Dave yet. It was really just the barrel formation of a band, but they sound so powerful already and Hit the Lights.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that James actually plays bass on that original recording instead of Ron McGovney.
Yes, I believe that's right, yeah.
So it's really just it's basically Lars James, and then they just bring in this fascinating little Metallica footnote, Lloyd Grant.
Yeah, Jamaican guitarist to play on it, and they re-recorded a few times for the next compilations. So I think it was Tom G. Ward from Celtic Frost said, I bought both Metal Massacre 1 and 2, just looking at both versions of Hit the Lights, because there's nothing that sounded anything like that anywhere else. And it's just, it's from another planet, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, if Tom G. Warrior says good things about you, then you're doing the right thing.
Right, yeah.
So I do have the actual text from Lars's ad, which I love. So this is from The Recycler. He wrote, drummer looking for other metal musicians to jam with. Tigers of Pantang, Diamond Head, and Iron Maiden. I adore the fact that he starts off with Tigers of Pantang, of all bands. And that's Tigers with a Y, John.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he was very into the new wave of British heavy metal. He had like a catalog that sent him new stuff. And one of his friends said it was like hanging out with Indiana Jones for new music, the way that he was just obsessed with discovering new bands and inviting himself to hang out with Diamond Head and Motorhead, and just he was really hustling.
So we have James Hetfield, who I think the formative thing in his background would be the Christian Scientist upbringing, which is pretty wacky. And then his mother died of cancer, refusing to get treatment.
Yeah, and that's been a big inspiration in Metallica song lyrics, like The God That Failed. Yeah, his father left the family when he was 13. His mother died when he was 16. She would not get help. And yeah, he went to live with his stepbrothers and was this kind of loner without helping her parents. And he has stories about, just going to church and a kid would come with a broken arm and be like, see, I'm all healed. God's healing me. And they're just like, what is going on here? Yeah, and Lars had a completely different upbringing where he had a dad who was a public intellectual who played tennis in Denmark and got famous jazz guys to come over to his house. They're really just on opposite ends of the world and upbringings and everything.
That those two guys would end up with the sort of musical chemistry they had is just the weirdest thing in the world.
Oh, totally, yeah.
May of 1981 would be when the two fellows first met, and Ron McGovney was, though he didn't play on that first recording, he was already kind of on the scene, right? He was in Leather Charm with James.
Yeah.
So he's floating around there, and he is going to be the first bass player for Metallica. And then there's this fellow named, Dave Mustaine?
Yeah, whatever happened to him, yeah.
It's too bad, just a footnote in history.
Oh, yeah, no one ever heard of him again.
Actually, John, I'm curious. We joke here, but do you know who Dave Mustaine is? Does this make any sense?
Absolutely not. No, of course not. Come on, guys.
It's such a fascinating story. I mean, it's like the Paradise Lost of metal, right? Where he got cast out of Metallica and he was like their lead guitarist. And if you read like old reviews, they're all like, band's all right, but like that guitarist is a star.
Yeah, he was like the front man, essentially.
Basically, yeah. He did all the stage banter. He had this great kind of like fiery red hair look. He's an incredible shredder, like a lot of chemistry and stage persona. And like weeks before they recorded their first record, they kicked him out. He's a violent alcoholic and just like woke him up. We're like, sorry, we're sending you on a bus back home. Like, goodbye. And in the months after that, he formed Megadeth and was like their biggest rival for many years and was the leader. And he talked shit about them in the press and he kept, competing with them. And he never got quite as big, but he was like the leader of his different band, just like, my band's going to kick Metallica's ass. And just like, it's like to this day, like a few weeks ago, he's still talking about Metallica in interviews. And I mean, he's had like an incredible career, but he just still has this kind of like fire that he like can't let go of.
I mean, that's the thing, is that Megadeth were definitely never quite as big as Metallica, but they were literally like the second biggest thrash metal band in the world.
Yeah, I mean, something I say in the book is that, people love to debate Metallica versus Megadeth and stuff like that, but people also debate like Metallica versus Nirvana or Metallica versus Guns N' Roses. Nobody does that with Megadeth, right? Megadeth is very metal niche. It's very like, Megadeth versus Slayer, Megadeth versus Metallica, but they're not like transcendent the way Metallica are. And I think that just eats up Dave in a way that he's very vocal about in interviews.
Now, I'm sure this will make Dave feel much better. My own first thrash album was So Far So Good So What.
Oh, that's a classic, yeah.
Yeah, I remember taking it home and I was like, okay, this is the thrash stuff. Am I going to find Satan? Is it going to warp my brain?
Oh my God, that opening Into the Lungs of Hell where like, you're like, what's going on here? Then suddenly like, the thrash comes in. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, so good.
Oh, so good, yeah.
Yeah, so I absolutely adore Megadeth. I mean, I love Metallica. I mean, look, I think your point is a really good one. That, well, Metallica versus Nirvana as important cultural forces is a discussion people might have. Megadeth versus Britney Spears or whatever, it's not the kind of discussions people are going to have.
We're going to start now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I want to lead this debate.
That's how we're going to have the rest of the podcast, actually. We're just going to compare Megadeth to various popular media.
Oh, yeah. Dave would love that, yeah.
Okay, one more bit of formative anecdote. So the name Metallica, do you have the origin story for like how they came across that name?
Yeah. Lars was supposedly talking it over with a friend who was coming with him for his metal magazine, and the friend was like, I was thinking about calling Metallica, and Lars was like, oh, go with the other name. They took the name Metallica for that.
Such a dick move.
Such a dick move, but there's some debate origins. There's also an old New Wave of British heavy metal encyclopedia called Encyclopedia Metallica from the very, very early 80s or late 70s, and some people wonder if that's where it came from, but yeah, it's kind of like an obscure term floating around that they mainstreamed.
So before we sort of transition into beginning to get into like the albums and whatnot, I do want to take our first music listening break. And so what we're going to do is actually play the original Metal Massacre version of Hit the Lights. The first pressing, the one that's just basically primarily James and Lars, plus the solo courtesy of Lloyd Grant. So that's going to be in the show notes. So everybody should pause the podcast. If you've never heard it, I think it is really important bit of Metallica history. It's kind of where it all begins. So you can click the link on the show notes and then come on back and we will talk more Metallica momentarily. How about them apples, everybody? What are our thoughts about this very earliest, roughest, rawest, but still pretty freaking good iteration of Metallica?
I mean, it changed everything. I love that their first song is about hitting the lights. I like that, the show's about to start, the dream's about to begin. And, that opening lyric, we're going to kick some ass tonight, which is like the biggest understatement of Metallica's career. Like, just tonight we're going to kick ass, right? But
they're also writing about their fans, which I think is amazing.
and the word they use to describe the fans is, they don't say their fans are smart or cool or tough. They say our fans are insane, which is such a great way to describe the fans. And it just changes everything. Slayer wrote Aggressive Perfector based on Hit the Lights. It's the first song on Metallica's first record. I love, this just happened to me many times over the years, is playing that song for your punk friends who have no idea they're going to like Metallica. We're just like, Metallica, that's, that's a metal, it's not punk, it's so lame. But then you play them Kill 'Em All, and like that open Hit the Lights, like this is like Motorhead. It's like, it's such a thrashy, like hardcore song.
Yeah, it's very cool. The thing that Kill 'Em All does best is its raw ferocity. And so these rougher, earlier versions, whether it's No Life to Leather or this, they're just, they work.
Totally,
I don't, demos don't always work. but with Metallica, I think they work surprisingly well.
Absolutely, yeah, that production works for that song, and I think that production works very well for Kill 'Em All and for No Life to Leather.
Okay, so let's talk the rest of the formative prehistory of Metallica. We got to get the real classic lineup together. So where we're at right now, we've talked about, obviously, James and Lars meet. We've talked about Ron McGovney is currently, as we sit here, the bass player, which is, spoiler alert, not to last too terribly long. And then we've got the, of course, magnificent Dave Mustaine shredding away, not as of that Hit the Lights Mal Massacre recording, but as of the early demos. So, all right, then obviously we've got to replace Ron McGovney. So how did that go?
Well, they were kind of looking on replacing him for a while. He was feeling kind of left out of the band, like they were using him for his house and his car and stuff like that. And, he was going to see Motley Crue, who were kind of like their rivals at the time, and like the kind of like the enemy style of music to them. And they were very taken with Cliff Burton, who was in Trauma, and they went to go see him. And he lived in San Francisco, and the crazy thing is that Metallica completely relocated. They weren't a successful band at all then. They didn't have their first record out, but they were just moved from LA to San Francisco to get Cliff Burton to be the bassist.
For a bass player. John's a bass player.
Let's
John,
go.
could you... Do you think that I would relocate across a gigantic state like California for you?
I fully expect you to.
I mean, it turned out well for Metallica, right? So, yeah.
It worked out really well. I mean, obviously, Cliff Burton is more than just a bass player to Metallica. I mean, he's really the mentor. I mean, he was like 2 years older or whatever.
Yeah, he was a little older than them. He had a lot of musical experience. He briefly went to college for music. He went to the same community college that Tom Hanks went to. And, he was into classical music, and these old interviews, he's talking about like REM and U2 before they're famous. Like, have you heard of these bands? And he's very musically knowledgeable, and just like this total loner style where you'd have like bell bottoms and just like this kind of cowboy hat. He just like didn't care what people thought about his, fashion or clothes. By all accounts, a genuinely very sweet guy, too.
So it's a little esoteric, but I think it's a worthwhile side note. Metallica recorded No Life to Leather, which is kind of like the famous demo. They have a bunch of garage demos and crap other than that. But that's July 6, 1982. Now, on the liner notes to that, Cliff Burton is actually credited. But it was, in fact, Ron McGovney who played bass on that album.
Yes, yeah.
So that's really right at that transition period where Cliff is joining the band, McGovney is out, and classic lineup is this much closer to being put together. No Life to Leather is pretty fascinating to me. The simple fact that it's literally just 7 songs from Kill 'Em All. Again, we talk about the fully formed thing. It's rawer. They sound different. You got Mustaine instead of Hammett. And James's voice is really high.
Yeah. Some people I know still think that it's Dave on vocals because he's got that high voice.
I put that in my notes. It's amazing to me how much early James Hetfield, who sounds nothing like Dave Mustaine in his well-known voice, he sounds like Dave Mustaine.
Yeah, and in like the pre-internet days, there's a lot of like bootlegs going around, like the Mustaine version, like, and it isn't. It's James singing, but it sounds a lot like Dave.
Yeah, it's got that nasal quality. It's higher. It's pretty wacky.
Yeah, and they were looking for a new singer for a long time.
Even after Kill 'Em All, right?
Even after Kill 'Em All, like up to Ride the Lightning, they were asking new people because James wasn't that confident in his voice yet.
Well, and also James is a freaking insanely gifted rhythm guitarist. Possibly the best. I mean, I think it could be argued. And so, although his vocals are very much Metallica, I get it. I understand why he would want to focus on guitar. And also, although I'm not an Armored Saint fan particularly, like John Bush is a hell of a singer.
Oh, dude, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think he would sound great in Metallica.
Yeah, I mean, he sounded amazing in Anthrax, I think.
Yeah, I love those Anthrax records, yeah.
John, I feel like we're losing you with some of the esoterica.
100% no idea what's happening.
But the important thing to know, I mean, you noted the vocals, right, on the Metallica you've heard. It's not like James Hetfield is the singer to end all singers, right?
Yeah, so was it James on both those first albums? Okay.
It ended up always being James.
Okay.
Yeah. So that never took, of course, and it's probably for the best because Metallica's Metallica, and it all worked out. Okay, so getting signed, sort of, or at least the existence of Mega Force, and also the firing of Dave Mustaine. So they meet John Zazula first, or he reaches out to them, right? How does that all play out?
Yeah, they were kind of a mom and pop organization, and the Zazulas, John and Marcia, who just both passed away in like the last like year or so, mortgaged their home to finance Kill 'Em All, which like doesn't sound like it costs a lot to make, but they really just believed in this band and it ended up paying off for them, and they got like a good fortune to give them to Elektra for Ride the Lightning. But yeah, it was a risk that really paid off for them. Yeah, but they also, they also got signed in part because of the songs that Dave was writing with them and the way he was playing with them. And, it was just, James has a quote. He says, like, we could see that Dave was on the way to like killing all of us.
He's not a stable human being. Even today, he's not a stable human being.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, he's such an exciting performer and player, but he would get into fist fights with them, and he would pour beer on their amps and electrocute people. He would fight with people in the audience. Yeah, they went over other guitarist tapes without telling him, and then just one morning they woke him up. It took about 45 minutes apparently, and they drove him over to Port Authority and sent him back to California. 40 years ago, April 11th, actually.
Oh my! Oh, it's almost the anniversary of Mustaine being woken up, hungover, and fired.
Yeah, can you imagine that? They were so scared of him. They had to get him when he was tired still and just be like, like, okay, like still sleepy, put him on the bus and like doesn't know what hit him.
So for more context, they're of course based in San Francisco because they've moved up to San Francisco for Cliff. John Zazula apparently wired them money to hire a U-Haul, so they drive to New York in order to play some gigs, pretty much, and then eventually to record Kill 'Em All. So they have literally like just driven across the country. They've just played a gig like I think the night before.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Yeah, and they're about to record their debut album. And that's the morning where they wake basically their leader up in some respects, or at least he probably thought of himself their leader.
Yeah, and they threw him out. Yeah, and it's a morally dubious decision. They kept some of his music. He was, and like I love Dave Mustaine as a songwriter and lyricist. He was not a great lyricist yet.
Oh my God, Mechanics, the lyrics to Mechanics.
Oh my God, yeah, it's just like, yeah, he wrote all these kind of like corny songs that were just do not sound like Metallica songs, and yeah, they knew that the music should be kept and the lyrics should not, and James wrote better lyrics for those songs, and I can see why he'd be furious about that, but yeah, they rewrote them in a way that was more Metallica, and they kicked him out.
Yeah, so, John, the second song on Kill 'Em All, which is The Four Horsemen, for instance, used to be a Dave Mustaine penned Metallica song called Mechanics. And, of course, Four Horsemen is this sort of dramatic, fantastical story of the Four Horsemen and apocalypse and all that. Mechanics is just like a sex song with, like, car metaphors and stuff.
And, yeah, for years, Dave would introduce in concert, he's like, okay, you may think that this is their song, but this is my song. And, like, say, like, you want to hear how they play it and, like, mess it up. And it's like, well, here's how I play it. Here's the real way to play it.
I've never met Dave Mustaine, but I feel like I've had Dave Mustaines in my life. Those people who just, you never quite know if they're just gonna like kill you. Like,
oh yeah,
they're just gonna snap one. They're gonna be drunk. They're gonna do something really stupid, and it's gonna go drastically awry. I assume that's what Metallica were doing.
I mean, having watched 20-something years of Mustaine interviews, like sometimes he's perfectly fine, and sometimes he's just like, I didn't even get a second chance, and just like, you never know what you're going to get with him. But yeah, I mean, the music is fantastic, though.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so Metallica have fired Dave Mustaine and driven him to the bus terminal with a Greyhound ticket. That must have been a really fun ride home.
Yeah. Oh, John's just seething the whole way. Yeah. Just plotting his revenge.
Yeah. Yep. And then who should they bring in? I think he flew on his own dime, if I recall correctly. But who should they fly in from San Francisco?
It was Kirk Hammett from Exodus. They're listening to tapes from him. They called him on April Fool's Day, and he thought he was being kidded. He thought it was a joke. And Exodus was really his band. He had pretty much founded them and, written a lot of the music. Now they're like they're not like Megadeth fans, but they're like a big cult.
Yeah, they're like just outside of the big four.
Exactly. They're like number 5 or 6, with like Testament, but in Overkill.
Oh, I can make a controversial statement.
Yeah.
I think the best thrash debut is not Kill 'Em All. I think the best thrash debut is Bonded by Blood.
Interesting. Wow. Huh. That's a controversial statement.
I know. The switchboards are lighting up already.
Oh yeah, you're gonna get some angry calls for that. Yeah. I will say that I love all 4 of the big 4 very much. I'd say that Exodus are very well formed on Bonded by Blood in the way that some of the big 4 are not.
They had like an extra year of whatever dicking around with labels and stuff to get their shtick together.
But yeah, they called up Kirk and they got him over there. And apparently the first audition, he aced Seek and Destroy, and they got him on the record. And John Zazula apparently wanted him to replicate Dave's solos, and he had to compromise that. He was like, okay, I'll do the first couple of notes, but really make it mine. And yeah, they got Kirk Hammett on their first record.
And Dave had just nothing but good things to say about Kirk's performance.
Oh yeah.
dance.
Oh my God. Just like looking back like years, he said he slept with Kirk's girlfriend. He said like he just like every like cold thing, and just Kirk is just ripping off my solos. Yeah, one really funny quote saw from Dave is he said, "Well, you know what? They're gonna be screwed when they run out of my music." That obviously didn't happen.
Yeah, because I mean, Master of Puppets, they were pretty much out of energy by then. They had nothing going on at that point. So, in some respects, Kirk is probably my own favorite Metallica member, like as a person, and his sound is just so. I mean, that's kind of true of all of them, I suppose, but his sound is so intrinsic to Metallica's sound.
Yeah, I got especially close to Kirk in my mind, just like writing the book. Like he's such a nice guy, a cool guy,
A horror fan.
a great test. He's a great horror fan. He's got one of the world's leading horror collections.
So cool.
That book is wonderful, by the way. He's got a book called Too Much Horror Business, which is about he's got one of the world's leading horror collections of like memorabilia and posters and action figures. And he goes like through like really thoughtful, in-depth detail about like the actors and the movies and things like that. And he donates it to some museum exhibits. He's got a book about the museum too. That's very good, called It's Alive. And yeah, he talks about his sort of like abusive, neglectful childhood, and like this was my sort of like escape. And he loved like seeing Frankenstein's monster and other creatures like King Kong break free from their chains. He's like, that's what I could do. And it's a really touching book about loving horror, and like so detailed. Like the artwork is with such care. I love that book. So yeah, Kirk is the man.
He's awesome. If I was going to hang out with someone in Metallica, it would most definitely be him.
But by all accounts, a very nice stoner.
He's a really like chill, like for a thrash metal shredding guitarist, he's just a really chill, laid back guy. All right. Well, at this point, we've got the band together. So we've got the classic lineup. We've got James Hetfield on voice and rhythm guitar. We've got Lars Ulrich on drums. We've got Kirk Hammett now shredding the lead guitar. And of course, we've got Cliff Burton as the musical mentor and bassist and writer of classical bits intersped in the rest of the material, at least after the first album when he starts doing more writing.
So can I ask, before we get too much further down the road, when we get this sort of fundamental lineup, about how old are these guys?
Oh, they're kids. Yeah, I guess 19 and 20. So I guess Cliff was 21 when Kill 'Em All came out, and he's the oldest member of the band. And before him, Dave was the old man of the group. They basically like kicked off their big older brother. I think when they kicked him out, he was the only one who could legally get them alcohol at the time. Yeah, he was buying them all their drinks, and they fired him anyway. Yeah, they were their kids.
Okay, now that the band is together, and really very shortly after this lineup comes together, so it's I think April 15th or something like that is the first gig they play with this complete lineup. So Kill 'Em All was recorded between May 10th and 27th, 1983, in beautiful Rochester, New York. Everyone's favorite summer destination. It was produced by a fellow named Paul Curcio and was released by Johnny Z's Megaforce Records on July 25th of 1983. All right, so Ben, have you ever heard this album? Are you familiar with it?
Kill 'Em All actually is my first Metallica CD, I'll be honest. I was a 90s kid. I grew up with like the Black Album hits, but Kill 'Em All was the first one that was available to me because I was dependent in those days on the $5 section of the CD store, the used CD store. And so I found that in there, and I'd read that Kill 'Em All was awesome, that it was heavy, and so I got it. It was my first Metallica CD, and I loved it. But the one thing I'll add is that I was too young to understand why someone who liked Kill 'Em All would not like the Black Album, because I was like, this is great, it's heavy and it's fast and catchy, just like the Black Album. But like I'd not yet met that sort of culture. My band got too popular, like now like posers like it. To me, it sounded good for the ways that Enter Sandman sounded good. So I loved Kill 'Em All, absolutely.
I was just a couple of years older, so I had gotten So Far So Good So What, probably 88 or so, and then like right after that was And Justice for All, and particularly the one video.
Oh my God, so good.
So yeah, so that was really my introduction to Metallica. My first real deep dive, I remember, was checking Ride the Lightning out of the library of all things.
Oh wow, yeah. Great resource.
Yeah. So I don't know when I finally came to Kill 'Em All. I mean, it wasn't, it was pretty early on, but it was definitely after Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All for me. So it's a very different perspective, I think. So, John, you listened to Kill 'Em All. You have things to share. What do you think?
I mean, I liked this. I did. One of the things that's always a sticking point for me when I listen to all of the music that we talk about on this podcast is the general quality of the singing. Ben, you don't know me. I come from a Western classical music tradition, and particularly I work a lot in opera. So the singing and the lyrical content is always kind of what hangs me up on most of the stuff. One of the things I really appreciated about this is just how little singing there is. Like, the singing that's there is not super offensive, but early on in the show, we talked about the band Death.
Oh, yeah.
And I was I was there and I was with it, and then they started singing, and I wanted to kill myself.
I wanted to kill him too, actually, as a result of that.
That's valid, but with Kill 'Em All, I really just was able to enjoy and appreciate the music, and it was fun music to me.
That's interesting. That's interesting that like there's not as much singing on that record. Yeah, I'm thinking like I remember when doing the book and reading about like how many people have covered Metallica, especially like Nothing Else Matters has like hundreds of versions, and I think part of that is that James, a little bit like why so many people cover like Bob Dylan or Leonard Cohen, where they're like, oh, I could do better than that. I love James's voice, but I think a lot of people hear that, he doesn't have like the most range. People are just like, oh, that's easy. But yeah, I think that he kind of makes people feel like they can sing as well as, or if not better than him when they hear him.
But what he does sing feels really appropriate. It's not like it's just bad singing, so we decided to have a small amount of it. It felt like contextually right for every song.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even though we talked about John Bush and we talked about the idea that they had of replacing him, James is the voice of Metallica. Whatever organic chemistry there is there, it all fits real nicely together.
Definitely, it is chemistry.
And I will point out, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't James' mother an opera singer?
She was, yeah. James's mother was an artist. She was a visual artist. She was an opera singer. His dad was kind of like an outdoorsman. He was a frontier guy who was into like hunting and fishing and things like that. Yeah, his mom like painted pictures of, like the Aerosmith guys in James's room for him, and she's an opera singer. She was like the sort of like the artist of the family that I think James looked up to, and she made him take piano lessons, which he did not like, although he credits it for sort of the way he learned his sort of musical sensibilities later on. So yeah, she was an opera singer. That's right.
All right, so quick sort of polling: favorite songs, least favorite songs, anything specifically particularly interesting or exciting or not on Kill 'Em All?
Boy, I guess I do love Hit the Lights. I don't think I have a least favorite on Kill 'Em All. I like every song on that record. I love Jump at the Fire is a great one.
That's good. It's Metallica's Satan song. It's like the only Satan song Metallica wrote that I can think of.
That's true, yeah. And that's another one that Dave wrote early lyrics to that was about like a sex thing, and it was just it was not very good. Yeah, but I love Jump at the Fire. I love Whiplash, and Norm. I mean, yeah, I love every second of Kill 'Em All. I'll just be honest. Yeah. How about you?
So I have a couple of things. Number one, I think that with one exception, side one of Kill 'Em All is basically perfect. Like, I absolutely love side one of Kill 'Em All. The exception, and I may be struck down by Metallica fans, and I want to say that I love Cliff Burton. I think I do not like Anastasia. I don't.
Wow.
I don't like understand what value it adds. I'm the guy. Yeah. I just
even I liked that one, Eric.
I know. I was so surprised when I heard that.
I think it's gorgeous.
To me, it's fun. It's not. All right. Let me rephrase that. It's not like it's ugly. I'm not trying to say like it's a piece of stupid crap or anything. I'm not saying that. To me, it's just it doesn't really serve any aesthetic function. It's like a nice little arpeggiated bass thingy, and then it becomes like a studio jam session once Lars comes in.
Yeah, it's like the Eruption for bass players. I know it's not a particularly original thought, but I love it. I love the way it sounds. It's not my favorite release, but that scene in S&M 2 when they get the classical music company and the guys all leave the stage and the cellist starts playing this beautiful forlorn piece that suddenly turns into Anastasia pulling teeth, and it's just you hear that kind of like classical chops in it. I love that. I love that song. Yeah.
John, you liked Anastasia, right?
I did. Yeah. And also I'll push back on not serving an aesthetic purpose. It's a big contrast where it's placed in the record to everything around it, which is nice to create different levels and layers to the record overall.
I completely agree with that conceptually. I would just argue that Kill 'Em All's shtick overall is that it's a big ball of fiery energy. So I would be okay without that, but I'll take your point. It does serve that function. There's no question. All right, so I said side one is basically perfect, except I don't love Anastasia. Side two, to me, I mean, obviously has Seek and Destroy, which is like a Stone classic.
Right, yeah.
None of the other songs are, they're all fine. None of them are bad. I don't think any of them are great. I think they're all good songs. They're all Phantom Lord to me is like an okay song. No Remorse and Metal Militia are both pretty good.
I love those. I think it's one of their perfect records. Obviously I wrote a book about them, so obviously I'm going to be a fan, yeah. I
don't think you're alone in that. And again, I think it's a great album. I think it's arguably the first thrash album. I mean, Exciter's Metal Maniac is maybe in that discussion. I mean, there's a few things, but really in a meaningful sense. It's certainly the first fully realized thrash album. And it's really freaking good. I don't want to leave any other impression besides the fact it's really good. Of the original 5, I would take Kill 'Em All over the Black Album. But other than that, it's my least favorite of them. But that's just me.
And as we frequently find on this podcast, you're completely wrong.
almost exclusively. So let's take one more of those musical pauses so that we can kind of get a sense, for anyone who, like John, maybe wasn't well steeped in Kill 'Em All prior to this week. And this is a really good opportunity to sort of compare and contrast the sort of raw, yet, in, as we discussed, pretty fully formed version of Hit the Lights that we found on Metal Massacre versus the opening track of the opening salvo of Metallica's real professional career, Hit the Lights, as performed by the classic lineup on Kill 'Em All. So, everybody, pause the podcast, click on the link on the show notes. If you're not familiar with this track, listen to it like 36 times because it really is indispensable. And we'll be back momentarily. All right, now, I dissed Kill 'Em All a little bit. I talked a little bit of trash, but that is a cool fucking song. John, you liked Hit the Lights.
Yeah, I liked that album a lot.
Yeah, you're a Metallica fan. You're going to get a tattoo after this. So, any Hit the Lights specific thoughts?
Well, I touched earlier about that, starting their career with, Turning Off the Lights and The Dream's About to Begin, and first song, first record, all that. And I love how they also sort of did the same thing when they reinvented themselves on the Black Album, right? They started with Turning Off the Lights, the Enter Sandman, just like, Say Your Prayers, Kid, Sleep with the One Eye Open. I mean, I went to that, the 40th anniversary Metallica show last year in San Francisco, and they opened with Hit the Lights, and just that fade in, which is such a rare thing on a metal record, and just like it was such a powerful moment.
So this is obviously it's like a studio thing, but that's one of the real differences of this version versus those earlier versions is you have that little that studio sort of sound effect thing at the beginning that's really cool and weird and striking.
Oh yeah, and I just remember like hearing it sort of fade in, just like, wait, do I need to turn this up louder? And then realizing, oh, this is about to get heavier than anything I've heard before. It's just yeah, and you hear you hear the start of like metalcore, like Converge and the Joan Escape Plan. You hear that sort of like sludge of like the Melvins. You hear I feel like so much gets birthed from that song.
Yeah, it is definitely one of the sort of iconic moments in heavy metal history.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And so Hit the Lights was actually, I believe James brought that with him from Leather Charm, right?
Yes, he did, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know what the original version sounded like. I know he and Lars kind of reworked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a hell of an opening. Okay. So we've discussed how the band came together. We've discussed their wildly significant world-changing debut.
Wait a minute. How was this album received? Was Kill 'Em All like instantly super popular or?
Yeah, it's definitely like a cult success then that's gone on to be bigger. I don't know who you'd compare it to today. It was like the Cool Kids metal record. It wasn't like, as big as like a Motley Crue record or something like that, but it was an underground thing that people liked.
So out the gate, they weren't Metallica.
Yeah, I mean, they were playing clubs. They weren't on the radio yet or anything like that.
John, do you have any other important pressing questions?
No, that was my one.
So John, can I move on now? Fucker, you okay?
Sure.
I don't have to. I know you're very attached to this album. Okay, so in my opinion, the Metallica as we know it was really and truly born with the release of their second album, the utterly magnificent Ride the Lightning. As I said, I think Kill 'Em All is a really cool album. It's a really, really important album. But with Ride the Lightning, Metallica really create the first true thrash metal masterpiece. Of course, there's some people who feel like Metallica had sold out with Ride the Lightning, and we're no longer really a thrash band. I think that's a 15-year-old from 1984's opinion.
Yeah. But it's funny to read that, because like now it's like an indisputable classic, but it's funny to look back at that time, and a lot of people were like, now they're different now. It's not the same band, not as good, but it's it was a real grower for a lot of people.
Ride the Lightning was Metallica's last release on Megaforce, with a major label glories soon to come. It was recorded in, of all places, Denmark. This is where Metallica come face to face with one of my favorite bands in the whole world, Merciful Fate.
Yeah.
To me, the most important thing Metallica ever did was hang out with Merciful Fate.
just saw him for the first time recently on that tour.
Oh, you got to see him! I didn't see him! I've seen King Diamond multiple times. I did not. The closest, so they came to Atlanta, which is about like 5 hours from here, on a weeknight.
Oh,
and I was like, it was just logistically, there was no possible way to do it.
They'll be back, man.
Ugh,
They're here to stay, it sounds like. Yeah.
I am very, very, very excited to see that. Okay, so it was recorded at Sweet Silence Studios between February 20th and March 14th of 1984 and released on July 27th, 1984. So the production is credited to the band, which is kind of interesting because it's early, but also, very importantly, Flemming Rasmussen, who would continue to work with Metallica for the remainder of the 1980s, for basically the rest of their unimpeachable 80s classics. And also Mark Whitaker, who then went on to produce Bonded by Blood.
That's right, yeah.
yeah, in 1985 from Exodus. So, John, I want to be really, really clear about this. You're a grown-ass man,
That's correct.
and yet, today was the first day you ever listened to Ride the Lightning.
That is also correct.
Didn't you say you knew one of the songs?
I had heard For Whom the Bell Tolls before.
Probably at like a sporting event or something.
Seems possible. Yeah.
That's a great song.
That's a great song. Yeah.
The album in its totality today was the first time.
So I had assumed that you'd come on this podcast after having listened to it. Your hair would be long, you would have a tattoo prominently displayed, that you would be totally changed. But I feel like Ride the Lightning did not impact you in the same way Kill 'Em All did.
So I'll say I liked Kill 'Em All more. Ride the Lightning was good. I'm not saying it was bad. I'm not saying I didn't like it. But the energy of Kill 'Em All was more appealing to me. The overall kind of just driving aesthetic and almost relentless quality of the album as a whole was more attractive to me. Ride the Lightning, it's funny to hear you guys talk about it because I'm sure for both of you, these are albums that are just like ingrained into you. But for me, I don't want to say it sounds like a different band, but there is definitely a different aesthetic in Ride the Lightning. There's a lot more of those acoustic elements, and there are more songs on Ride the Lightning that just sort of end with a fade as opposed to coming to a conclusion. And these are little things to me that stand out that, again, not bad, but different.
You know, it's funny you say that. They're almost a different band because they really are. Because Kill 'Em All is written by pretty much by James, Dave, and Lars, with the exception of Anesthesia Pulling Teeth. But Ride the Lightning is written by Cliff, James, Lars, and Kirk. So they're like pretty much different band at that point. And to be fair, like my initial reaction to Ride the Lightning was kind of like yours, where I was like, well, it's not, it doesn't have the same kind of maintained energy as Kill 'Em All. And I can relate to those kids who in the 80s were listening to Ride the Lightning and think like,
Sell out!
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I mean, obviously, it's a huge part of my life and I love it. But I remember when I first got Ride the Lightning being like, okay, well, it's not really like Kill 'Em All or the Black Album. And it was a grower for me, for sure.
I guess it's just a little bit surprising to me, John, that you had that reaction. I totally understand it. I actually feel that way about a lot of music, that raw, visceral energy is sometimes more interesting than polish and precision and some of those other things. I mean, I guess part of it is that Ride the Lightning has more of what at least I associate as like the classic Metallica sound. That would be the trio of Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and And Justice for All. They all have a lot in common. I mean, they all share like literally the same album template in many respects. You don't have that background. And also, I did hear Ride the Lightning before I heard Kill 'Em All. So, again, that's just a different perspective. But as much as I think you're dumb, you are not the only person in the world to prefer Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning. It's definitely not unheard of.
Again, they're both good. I enjoyed both of them, which is rare for me.
Ben, I don't think you appreciate the beautiful, fleeting glimpse of John saying something is good.
You know what though? But that's like part of the magic of Metallica is that they do have that kind of crossover. And like, you talk to people about writing about them or stuff like, yeah, I'm not really a metal person, but I love Metallica. And they, it's the same way like, yeah, I don't love country, but I love Johnny Cash, right? Or yeah, not really a reggae guy, but I love Bob Marley, right? It's like they're that kind of like crossover band like that. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah, look, Metallica are not my favorite band, but Metallica are a really good fucking band. All right, I'm going to be a dick now. Metallica were a really good fucking band. I would be lying to myself if I said I thought Metallica currently are a good band, but they were incredible. The classic Metallica is unimpeachable. And I know some people love contemporary Metallica, and by contemporary I mean everything after the Black Album.
Yeah.
Basically. Although, obviously, there's a material difference between everything after Death Magnetic and everything between the Black Album and Death Magnetic. But yeah, they're a band that is, or at least was, amazing, and there's no questioning it. So, Ride the Lightning, it's probably worth noting, because I'm a huge Stephen King fan, that this idea came from The Stand.
Yes, he's had an incredible influence on metal with like Anthrax and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a line from it means getting the electric chair, and it's a line that Kirk found in The Stand.
Ah, Kirk.
Yeah, Kirk is a big Stephen King fan.
Yeah, well, of course. How could he not be? So we're not going to get into the Master of Puppets era and beyond. Terrible spoiler alert. Of course, Cliff Burton is going to pass away in a terrible bus accident on the Master of Puppets tour. But this is the album where you can really, as you said, other than Anastasia, Cliff didn't do any writing for Kill 'Em All.
Right.
Cliff's influence is all over this album, I think.
Yeah. Call of the Cthulhu. He was the H.P. Lovecraft fan, and he got them to that. Yeah, his writing is all over it. It's you can really hear more Cliff on this record.
And of course, this album introduces the ballad. As a kid, I loved Fade to Black. As an adult, I think it might be my favorite Metallica song. Like, I really, really love that song.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great song. It's so different and it's so powerful and just does so much good. I absolutely love Fade to Black.
I love the fact that it was inspired, right, by them getting their equipment stolen.
Yeah, right. It's the funny thing about that too is their equipment got stolen and they were feeling disheartened, and James wrote that song and they stole all the equipment, but the one thing they left on the bus was the box of Metallica shirts, which today would be the most expensive thing in that car, like by far. Like they'll go like 5 digits, but yeah, just the thieves were like, yeah, that's gonna doesn't cost anything. So
I mean, it does say something about their age and whatnot. I mean, it's a beautiful, timeless song. It's a sort of a suicide, contemplation of suicide song. But of course, it's about like losing your gear, which I'm sure was like, oh my God, what the hell are we gonna do?
Oh yeah, and like there was something that James had, like something that his mom had given him in there, and like so they're all upset. Yeah, and like the last time I saw Metallica, like they played Fade to Black, and James gave a short speech and says like by the way, if you're feeling those things, get help. We love you. We made it through that. And just, he can kind of like, it's so up for interpretation that he can talk to people who are feeling like, down or suicidal and don't really to getting their equipment stolen. But it's so open for interpretation. And I think it's part of what makes it such a beautiful song.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, we don't need to go song by song or anything, but any thoughts on any specific songs, other songs on Ride the Lightning?
It's interesting you brought For Whom the Bell Tolls, and you said you probably heard it at like sports games and things like that. Because I remember growing up in the 90s and loving Metallica, you never heard anything pre the Black Album except for once in a while one on the radio or on TV. You just never heard it. It was all nothing from Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, or Kill 'Em All. Just like it was hidden. You had to like go to record store to find it and hear it. And now I think that they've kind of changed the world so much by making that kind of music accessible to so many people. Now you could hear For Whom the Bell Tolls at any sports game. You can hear it in movies.
You can watch Master of Puppets on Netflix shows.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. I think that they changed the world and made the world safe for that kind of music.
So I'm going to be a jerk again. So I love Ride the Lightning. When I was younger, I would probably have said Ride the Lightning was my favorite Metallica album. As now I would probably say Master of Puppets is my favorite Metallica album. They're both amazing, as is And Justice for All. I think, to a lesser degree, Ride the Lightning suffers a little bit from the same thing that I think Kill 'Em All suffers from. The second side is not as good as the first side.
Interesting.
Trapped Under Ice is fine. It's good.
I love Trapped Under Ice, yeah.
I like it. I don't dislike it. Escape. Metallica hates Escape, which is fun.
Metallica hates Escape, which is fascinating. Is that like they only played it once, and that was when they played Ride the Lightning front to back. They hate Escape, which is fascinating because that's a great record. It's a 5-star record. A lot of people love it, but Metallica hates Escape.
I mean, it's definitely different. It's like Metallica pretending to be Iron Maiden.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah, and they're also kind of coy about it. Like James thought he had to write at the last minute, or just like they're kind of coy about why they don't like Escape, but it's clear they don't like it.
Yeah, so. They don't like it. Again, I am not going to say any songs on Ride the Lightning are bad. I think it's a reasonable thing to say Ride the Lightning is effectively a perfect record. I do think that those two songs are a little weaker than it. Like everything on side 1 is like A+++. Side 2, both of those songs are like probably A's, maybe A minuses. Here's my all right. Creeping Death, maybe the best Metallica. Like that song's freaking ridiculously good. I don't like Metallica instrumentals. I'm going to say it right now.
Yeah, you don't like Anesthesia, and you don't like Call of the Cthulhu. Yeah,
I think their instrumentals are a little bit boring. Now, John, I'm really curious because you're not a big instrumental guy. Do you the last track? It's about 9 minutes long. Call of Cthulhu. What were your thoughts?
Maybe a teeny bit long for my taste, but I have no issues with their instrumental tracks. I liked Anastasia. I liked Call of Cthulhu.
You're just a contrarian. I hate you.
No, I think you're just wrong. on this particular issue, they play well together and it's good music. I don't know what your problem is.
I think it's great. You know, I think that it's not the kind of thing I would have put on when I was initially getting into Metallica, but I think that having that on that record and like listening to it a few times and getting into it made me appreciate music like that more and made me love Call of Cthulhu.
I could see this as being like a really good gateway for especially for kids, like getting into Metallica and stuff, for instrumental music, classical influences. To me, there's just not that much of aesthetic interest going on to justify 9 minutes of that particular instrumental. It works pretty nice. Like S&M I don't love, but it like Call of Cthulhu and S&M 2 works.
That's
pretty,
a great
pretty
opener.
well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's a really good context for it when you really emphasize the orchestral nature of it and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I just have terrible taste in music. What can I say? Metallica instrumentals. That's something that they did. They don't really. Have they done any like post Black album?
There's one on Death Magnetic, which is, it's kind of like, they're sort of like conscious, like, recreate the old sound decision that's near the end, called Suicide and Redemption. And then they have, I guess James does like kind of a yeah in it, but they do an instrumental cover of They're Good, the Bad, and the Ugly song, The Ecstasy of Gold, which is where they play it, themselves and do wow wow, and that works. But
well, and that's their entrance, right? That's their historic like walk on music.
Yeah, and so their version of that's instrumental too. But yeah, I think other than that, they haven't. They've kind of been avoiding instrumentals since then.
Yeah, it was their. They got my letters, I guess.
I was just thinking, yeah. They listen to the fans there, yeah, right? Yeah. No more instrumentals. Yeah.
I'm not here to say that Call of Cthulhu or again any song on Ride the Lightning is bad. It's just that we're dealing with amazing music, some of which I think is less amazing than others.
Fair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's make sure that no one who listens to this podcast has not heard at least something from Ride the Lightning when all is said and done. We're going to take one final listening break. This will be an opportunity to hear the extraordinary Ernest Hemingway informed For Whom the Bell Tolls. Incredible, incredible stuff. So pause the podcast, play the link on the show notes, and we'll be back in just a minute. So one thing I learned, actually, the melodic line at the beginning, that's Cliff, right? Playing the really high distorted bass.
Yeah, you can watch, there's a really old shoddy music video of his other band Trauma playing at a high school battle of the bands. And it's kind of like this psychedelic, third-rate Blue Oyster Cult type thing. And then, out of nowhere, he plays that, and it's just that's
that's
yeah,
fascinating.
Right? Yeah,
that's like hearing Crazy Train in a Quiet Riot show before. Randy Rhoads joined Ozzy.
Yeah.
All right, so I think everybody agrees that For Whom the Bell Tolls is just a flippin' banger. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It's a very unusual structure. I remember reading something about it's 40% intro, and there's a 5-part riff cycle in there, and then there's they go through everything. It's over 2 minutes before it gets to him singing, and then there's 40% of him singing, and then 20% of the outro. It's a very oddly structured song to be as popular as it is.
It's a completely different phenomenon, but one of my favorite songs is Dream On by Aerosmith. And you kind of spend all of Dream On waiting for the big high shrieking at the end, and the whole thing you just anticipate. And the intro to For Whom the Bell Tolls is kind of like that, where it keeps going and you think it's about to start and it doesn't, and you just builds up such a head of steam and excitement that when that verse comes in, it's just ah!
Yeah.
Freaking cool. And John, you're a big fan of the Spanish Civil War, right? So you like the
huge fan of the Spanish Civil War. One of my favorite civil wars.
Yeah.
If I had to pick.
Yeah.
Have you read the Hemingway?
I do like Hemingway, but this is one that I haven't read.
That's great. It's so
good.
Yeah.
It's really is just a flippin' amazing book.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I think there's this idea that Metallica can't be as smart as they're pretending to be. I remember I was talking with a friend about this. There's another music podcast where they're talking about the best songs inspired by books. And someone brought up that, and, Metallica, and one For Whom the Bell Tolls. And the other critic was like, oh, but those are high school boy books. And that's a high school boy interpretation. But going over the song for the book, he captures the story very well. And some of Hemingway's actual dialogue and the scenes. And it's a very smart look at that book.
Meta lyrics are often not the best part about heavy
Right.
metal. And like they're not the best part about Metallica either, but they're really good. Like they're totally
Oh
effective.
yeah,
And
yeah. Fade to Black and
Yeah.
From the Bell Tolls. It's a very smart song. Just like yeah, just capturing moments from that book. I think it does a great job of that.
No, I completely agree. All right, any other Ride the Lightning thoughts?
Are you gonna listen to it again, John? Or
Yeah, John.
I mean, probably we'll see. I've set myself this challenge of listening to one new album every week this year. I think I might just continue down the Metallica discography and see what else I find.
I wouldn't go too far down that.
No, I mean, look, I've heard what you all are
I
saying.
mean, they have some interesting failures along the way, but it's
Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious to get John's take on Lulu.
I was just thinking Lulu, which I am one of the only defenders of. You can count on one hand the amount of people who like that record, including the guy in your shirt, David Bowie, who apparently loved Lulu. But
That's what I heard.
yeah, I think it's such a cool oddball turn. I love that they're both, when a lot of people are just sort of rehashing their past glories, both Lou Reed and Metallica were just offending people and trying something completely different and new. And it's not what I would recommend to a lot of people, but as someone who likes kind of weird, off-putting music, I think it's great.
And John, just to be clear, so it is a collaboration between Lou Reed and Metallica that tells the same story as the Berg opera, which is based on a play, Lulu.
Yeah,
right.
It's a very jarring lyrics and all these kind of weird, transitions and some spoken word. And there's this beautiful last piece called Junior Dad. That's it's kind of
That's the one that people like.
That's probably, if there is a standard. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm guessing there'll be a revisionist Lulu is good amount of think pieces a few years from now.
I mean, I think for me the real problem is not that they're doing something ambitious, which I think is great. It's that I have very little faith in later period Metallica.
Well, it's funny. They get, I mean, this is totally fair, but when they do Lulu, people are like, oh God, stick to the old stuff, and then they try 72 seasons sounds like it's more of a thrash thing, and people are like, but it sounds just too much like they're trying to do the old.
Oh
stuff,
yeah, they're fucked no matter what they do.
They're fucked no matter what.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But also, they're Metallica.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh, poor Metallica.
Yeah, oh, God,
I feel so bad for them.
Poor guys, yeah.
How do they sleep?
Yeah, right. No success. Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, at this point, we discussed the founding of Metallica. We've discussed the first two albums. I mean, we've basically discussed Metallica's entire career, right? Where this is where it ended. It's just Ride the Lightning, and then they rode off into the sunset.
Too bad they broke up after that.
Yeah. Obviously, today's discussion got a little wide-ranging. I mean, we came up with some interesting later Metallica discussions, but generally we covered just the very, very beginning of the Metallica story. John, I think this tells you something. If we've only covered the beginning of Metallica's history...
For the first time in our recording of this podcast, I'm not upset that we're going to have to come back to a topic.
So even though I'm not the world's biggest Metallica fan, that makes me pretty happy. You made me happy. We're going to have fun. I mean, come on, Master of Puppets ahead. Whew.
Classic.
And Justice for All. I will be very curious to see your reaction. And Justice for All as a bass player.
Oh boy. Yeah. That's a whole other story. Yeah.
There's some issues there. We won't get into that today, but there are some issues there. All right. Well, look, Ben, we're wrapping up. We've kind of done our thing. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, it was great to be here.
Yeah.
You were awesome. Just thanks for taking the time. I mean, we've been talking for quite a while.
My pleasure. Dude,
really appreciate it.
Blast to talk to you guys. Love talking Metallica with y'all.
Awesome. So we will put links in the show notes to the Metallica book so that everybody can order it. It is awesome. I strongly endorse it. Thank you. Viva Metallica.
Hey, Viva Metallica. Great talking to you guys. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
John, is it really possible? Is it already time to say goodbye to season number 2 of the Heavy Metal 101 podcast?
It is time.
Look, this is heartrending for me, but at least we had the just fucking extraordinary opportunity to talk to Ben Apatoff. Like, how cool was that?
That was very cool.
Yeah, he was great. Nice guy. Knows things?
Knows things. Again, so nice.
Do you know people can know a thing about a thing? Like, this, I was not aware of that.
Clearly.
My understanding is that you just make stuff up and present yourself. The term I like to use is expert. You call yourself an expert, and everything just kind of falls into place from there.
So, just to be clear, you are a living example of everything having fallen into place.
Yes.
Got it.
Good. Okay, so look, if nothing else, we did accomplish something of value this year. Right? You'll agree, right? We interviewed Ben Apatoff. We learned about Metallica. Like, we did something.
I think we did.
That's, I think, more than anyone could possibly have expected, right?
Certainly from me. Let's be frank.
I totally believe you. I totally do. All right, like, so meanwhile, how the hell do you plan to fill the empty, meaningless hours between signing off today and the start of season 3?
I think I'm going to go eat a sandwich.
Oh, that's a really nice thing to do, to fill empty, meaningless hours.
I love food.
Yeah, food is good. I'm going to sleep a lot.
Hey, sleep is also good.
Yeah, sleep is great. I expect I'll spend some amount of time, like, forlornly staring out of windows.
I mean, at some point you're going to write season 3, right?
Well, now, actually, now that you bring it up, I suppose I will spend some amount of time writing a shit ton of podcast episodes, which is like my favorite thing to do.
Oh, so this is really great news.
I'm feeling better. You have actually made me feel better about this. This is going to be pretty cool.
I think that's 2 times in the last 3 hours. So
Wow.
Basically, we're done with positivity for the next several months.
I feel like we're pretty much hitting maximum good vibes. All right. Well, look, the most important takeaway here for everyone is that we shall return stronger and probably stupider than ever. Season 3 of the Heavy Metal 101 podcast will be back in August, when we shall pick up our narrative threads and tackle heavy metal's cultural high watermark in the mid through late 1980s. Now that's going to be fucking thrilling, right?
Can't wait.
Yeah, you told me when this started off that the mid to late 1980s was the thing you were most excited about, right?
Yes. When we talk about metal bands like Metallica.
Dun, 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 which John loves. So I actually already do have basically all of season 3 sketched out, but nothing is actually written down yet. And so if any of our listeners have any thoughts, suggestions, or things they passionately want to hear us yammer on about, we will certainly take that under advisement. So John, with that in mind, could you remind everyone of the best ways they can go about contacting us?
Of course, if you want to tell us what you think we should be talking about, you can send us an email via heavymetal101podcast@gmail.com. Of course, you can still leave us a voicemail at anchor.fm/heavymetal101podcast. Waiting for that first one. It's going to be a great day.
Somebody, it's going to make me so happy.
And don't you want to make Eric happy, people?
John did it twice. He knows what it's like. He's gotten that magical thrill.
I can tell you all, it's worth it. It's worth it. And of course, you can find us on social media on Facebook at Heavy Metal 101 Podcast, Twitter at Heavy_101, and on Instagram at Heavy Metal 101 Podcast.
So my goal for the off season is for us to get to, I'm thinking 10 million listeners. I suspect that this will not be possible without a whole lot of help from our friends, right?
I don't know what our current listenership is.
It's less than 10 million.
Okay.
Yes. So as such, if you'd like to get us to 10 million listeners, please don't hesitate to let other people know, either via your own social media posts or through a vast array of 5-star rankings and or verbose, glowing reviews. Any and all of those things will put a smile on both my and John's face, and that is something that is just a beautiful thing to behold. John, this is it. Parting is such sweet sorrow, but the time has come. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our beloved listeners before we sign off for summer breaksies?
Don't hurt yourselves. Be safe. Remember to use sunscreen.
Some really valuable advice, courtesy of John. Look, we love you all. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back before you know it. John, could you say goodbye to the nice people?
Goodbye, nice people.
Mwah! Bye-bye, everybody!